recording. Let's do a second recording for this. Okay, so that's if we've got the network for performance by. So just to recap, it's got a predefined list of metrics that you can quite easily set up to monitor. It integrates quite nicely into the product, and then you can cross-link reports into it. If you haven't got the network for performance by, you can still achieve a similar type of end, but there's a little bit more work for you to do. So first thing is we've got a thing called a custom poller. So the custom poller allows us to configure basically collect MIB information from boxes and do a threshold on it. So let me just walk you through the process. So what we do is we can go to custom poller, okay, so custom poller, configuration. Custom poller configuration. Okay, so I'm gonna walk through the process from start to finish. So what I want to do is I want to collect the interface utilization for all my routers, or for all interfaces which have the name SE asterisk. So I only want to collect this metric for all my interfaces which start SE something. Okay. Now, let's take an example. Just show you something here quickly. If I were to ask you to retrieve interface utilization information on router 1, but only for interfaces that are serial type interfaces, then what you need to work out is you need to work out which interfaces are serial interfaces. So if you go into the IF table, IF entry tree, and if you click on IF description, which is that OID number there, and you do get all, then in order for you to identify which IF indexes are serial type interfaces, you retrieve this value. Okay. You then cycle through each of the results, so we know that that's a serial interface, and that's got an IF index of 2. This is a serial interface, and that's got an IF index of 19. And this is a serial interface which has got an IF index of 20. Okay, so to work out which are serial interfaces on this device, you bring back the IF description. We then work out the indexes, so we know that at 2, 19 and 20 are serial interfaces. So when we proceed to bring back the figures, so for example, if I'm measuring input octets, which is that OID number there, so it's 136210, then in order to make sure that I only bring back the values for serial interfaces, I know that when I retrieve this information, the only IF indexes I'm interested in are 2, 19 and 20, which in this case are both 0. Everybody happy with that? So just to recap it, if I tell you that I only want to collect metrics for certain interfaces, then what we need to do is a two-phase process. We have to work out which interfaces are serial interfaces in this example. We do that by retrieving the IF description MIB or OID. We then cycle through it, and then we can work out from here which IF indexes are serial interfaces, so 2, 19 and 20. And then when we proceed to collect the actual data, we only bring back the data for those 3 index numbers in the case of router 1. So this is how the poller works now. You specify a filter value, or MIB OID number, which in this case is IF description. You specify the actual metric that you want to bring back, which in this case will be input utilization. And then when we set it up, we'll tell OpenView to only bring back the metrics for those particular interfaces. And that's the lab that I've set up for you. So, how do we do it? Okay, first thing we do is we got different options we specify here. We got policies, custom poll collections, and then if we've got the iSpy for performance product, we can create custom reports for these metrics that we want to collect. Okay, so I'll go into policy. And a policy is where we define basically the MIBs that we want to collect. We don't specify where we want to get them from, we just specify the MIBs the data that we want to collect generically. So I'm going to call this my input interface utilization. Okay. Sorry, I've done this wrong. I need to go to let's do the one first, sorry. I'll do that first. I've jumped the gun, my apologies. Okay, sorry. First thing to do is go to custom poller collections. Sorry, these tabs have been swapped around between 9.1 and 9.2. So in here I'm going to say my input utilization. Now what I can do is I can specify that if there's a threshold breach, I want it to affect the severity of the node that the threshold belongs to. So I'm going to click yes on that. I also have the option to export this information, and in the lab I'm going to get you to go through these options. I can also export the collected data to a CSV file. And then I can have some other reporting tool, if that's my choice, that collects this CSV information and puts it into a database. I can get it to generate an incident. And there you can specify when the so this, unlike we had in 7, where we could have a different incident for each threshold breach we had, we've only got one incident now. It's built into the product. So what I can do is I can specify what do I want to put into the source object for it. So I can either use the custom node collection or the custom poll instance. So I'm just going to leave it a custom poll instance. Which will be, so when I bring up the incident, the actual metric or the interface that is breached will be what appears in the source object field. Then we specify our MIB expression. Now, in this case, I want to bring back I shall go for, let's go for more choices. So what have we got? Or probably easier to just go for quick find. So I'm just going to go for IF utilization, so the first one there. The other thing when you're collecting information with older interfaces, so these routers are, for example, 8 meg serial links, the counters are 32-bit, which means that they roll over every so often. If that was a gig or a 10 gig link, then that count would roll over very, very quickly. So where you're looking at faster speed interfaces, rather than use the IF percentage utilization, you'd use the IFHC or high counter. So these are 64-bit counters, and they don't roll over as frequently. So anything sort of, you know, a gig to 10 gigs onwards, you need to use the 64-bit version, not the 32. So I'm going to go for IF util because this is just a simple serial interface, so it's fine. Okay, so that's the MIB expression or value that I want to bring back. Then in the filter bit, we said that we only want to do this for serial interfaces. So this is where we specify the MIB, which was IF description. So what's going to happen here is when we retrieve this information, the MIB filter variable allows us to work out which indexes of this table we want to retrieve, and we identify that as being the IF description. So what I do here is I click on the little MIB browser. We then go into ISO.org Internet Management, MIB2, Interfaces, Interface Table, Interface Entry, and then IF Description, and click OK. Then over here we can specify the thresholds that we want. So we're going to do it as a count-based threshold, and we're going to say that if the threshold is breached, so I'll just set that to major, so if it goes above 80%, we want to generate that as a major breach, and then we'll reset it again when it goes to 50. So the custom, and we'll look at the instances in a sec, but basically there are some built-in custom polled instances for this purpose, which I have to use. I can't modify them, or I can't define other ones. Okay. The other nice feature we got now is that where you might want to bring back, for example, if I want to monitor things like the state of batteries on UPSs or temperature sensors or fans, then what I can do now is I can have a comparison map. So a comparison map is where I don't have to say that something has to be above or less than a certain value. I can actually compare it against something. So for example, if I know that if a battery is faulty, that the metric I'm monitoring gives me a value of 2, then I can say that if the value that comes back is equal to 2, then I want to give it a certain severity. And I can also do this with text type values. So again, in some situations, the error condition that you want to monitor comes back as a text string, so you can match on that. In this case, because I'm doing interface utilization, it's not relevant, but that's a really, really powerful thing. So we use it a lot for, that's probably the most common example I come across, where people want to monitor things like UPSs that are in racks. So if the UPS has a certain value, metric that's got a certain value, it's a problem. Okay, so threshold, so we've done that. We then save it, so save and close. Sorry, can I save while the open? Okay, so must have another window open. Okay, where's the other window? Okay, that's fine. Right, so there I've defined what I want to collect. The next part of the operation is to define where I want to collect it from. So I click on Policies, go for New. So I'm going to call this My Interface Utilization. Specify the node group, or sorry, specify what I want to collect. So this is the MIB collection that I've defined here, so it's My Interface Utilization. Make it active. Change to specify the node group. So I want to grab it from my core routers. And then here is where I specify, remember when we did the collection we had the data that you want to bring back and the filter variable. So here's where I bring the two together. So the filter variable is SC asterisk. So what will happen when we run this off is that OpenView will collect the IF description from each device, scan through the results, find the indexes which match that pattern, and then they are the indexes it will use to collect the actual data. I'm going to put a polling frequency on that of a minute. Make sure it's active, which is good. Do save and close. Enable. So the other gotcha here is you have to remember to enable it. Do save and close. Okay, so the question I've just been asked, is it possible to custom poll a specific vendor MIB that reports more detailed information about the device and generate a node down event, for example, based on a specific vendor MIB collection? No, is the simple answer. What you can do is you can have that particular incident create a message of a certain severity, and then that can affect the status of the node. Because the difference now, Brian, is that we don't. It's not like the old version where you could generate a node down event from the. In 7 you could just create the event itself. Because the instances are being done differently now, the node down instances aren't actually generated as traps. They're built into the system. Yeah, exactly. You could do it in 7 quite easily, because everything that 7 did, there was a corresponding event for it, but that's different now. Because actually this was one of the applications we used to do it for, wasn't it? We used to do threshold monitoring, and then because we wanted to affect the state of the node, we had to use the that node status event to change the color of it. Now you don't need to do that, because I guess we can do it directly when we create the poll. Okay, so that's that bit done. So you enable the custom poller. So that's the other gotcha. And the other thing to remember here that can be a bit of a gotcha is when you're setting up the collections, make sure they're active, because if I make any changes to that, it will automatically go inactive. So save and close. Save and close. No, don't tell me I've lost it. Okay. Let's just see if it's there. Yep, okay, that's fine. Is that bit there? That bit's there as well, so that's cool. Okay. Right. So to monitor the state of this, if you go to actions, help, system information, then to see the state of the custom poller, so if you click on custom poller, then it tells you how many collections it's bringing back. So we can see here that we are currently monitoring 22 objects, and they're at that rate per minute. So if you are having problems with it, this is a good way of finding them. So that tells you whether the poller is actually working or not. And then if I go to a device, might be a bit early yet, but if I go to a device, inventory nodes, router 1, see what we got. So it might be a little bit early to do this, but we'll see. Then if we go to custom polled instances, there you go. So at the moment, we're looking good. So it's collecting the metrics from those interfaces. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I think this scenario is probably finished. Let me rerun the scenario to cause a threshold breach. And just from waiting for that to happen, I shall show you the configuration. So we'll just see if we can find the instances that it's generating for these incidences. Now these are management-based incidences. So there you can see them there. So depending on what severity you picked, it'll run one of these instances. So either custom poll critical, custom poll major, custom poll minor, custom poll warning. Let me just stop the recorder. Okay, stop recording.